Do you think fascist regime will return to Europe and illegal migration to Europe is fueling this? Illegal migration in Europe is a huge problem, and the EU is fueling this. See, every member of the EU. So, what is the EU? The European Union, right? It's a coalition of nations. It's a supranational organization. And what an organization like the EU does is that it has pooled sovereignty. What does it mean? It means that every nation that wants to become part of the EU has to reform its system in a variety of ways. And once you become a member of the EU, you lose some of your national sovereignty and you give it away. And in return, you get some benefits in exchange. What benefits do you get? Your people, your population can travel across the EU without visa, and your population can work anywhere in the EU without any special permits or anything. So your people, the individuals, get some benefits, but as a nation, you give up some of your sovereignty. It's like a deal with the devil. So when you give up some of this sovereignty, it means that these unelected people who work out of Brussels, the EU leadership, they will decide what policies will be implemented in your nation, even though they have not been elected by your people. And then they will assign um, immigration quotas and refugee quotas for every country, and you are forced to accept that. And if you don't accept it, then they impose a fine of several $1 million per day, which in the long run can bankrupt your nation. So when you have such a situation, what can you do? Well, you can do what the British did: Brexit. They exited the EU. But even then, they have this migration that's happening. Britain is now soon going to become a very different kind of nation demographically. So, despite exiting the EU, they still have their own idiotic policies. In the UK. Now, in the EU, the EU leadership from Brussels is implementing these policies, which is causing this demographic disaster in Europe. In European nations, they are forcibly they're forcing these nations to accept refugees, illegal infiltrators who are being funneled in on an industrial scale. And only low quality, low skill people from certain parts of the world are being allowed. Hmm? They don't want high skilled people with great degrees and all that. No, 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 no. They want people with no skills. And they want people from certain countries which have cultures that are very strongly incompatible with European values and culture. It's demographically re-engineering and breaking Europe. That's what Brussels is doing. That's what the EU is doing deliberately. So what can be the response? The response, we are seeing that people are really, really disaffected by this. People are really angry in various European countries. They're trying to push back, but the police come in the way. They allow the illegal infiltrators to do whatever they want, violence and public disorder and all that, but they don't allow the natives to fight back. Well, what on earth is going on, right? So that is going to give rise to racism, fascist sentiments, and all that, and people revisiting their perceptions of Mussolini and Hitler. That's going to happen when the entire state government machinery, EU machinery, is going to work against the native people of Europe. But I don't think fascist regimes will return to Europe simply because the EU won't allow this to happen. I don't think there's any real democracy anywhere in the world. I think any election can be rigged. I mean, recently there were elections in France, and what happened? Monsieur Macron did not even allow that government to come to power. So in France, in a nation like France, the president has almost unlimited powers. And Monsieur Macron has kind of exercised those, So I think throughout Europe, the left will stay in power, except for a couple of countries like Hungary and Poland to some extent, who are kind of trying to resist what the EU says. But how long will they ward this off? So I don't think fascist regimes will return to Europe. You may have soft fascist or soft right regimes in Europe, like Madame Meloni, who's kind of right wing, but I think she's more of a centrist than hard right. So In the long run, I think Europe is headed for disaster, demographic disaster. Europe's fate has been sealed by the Americans who control the EU, and that's what we're seeing. Europe is being deindustrialized, and illegal immigration is going to completely reshape the demographics of Europe. We're going to see this in the next 30, 40, 50 years. A very different kind of Europe will emerge. We're already seeing this in the UK right now. Excuse me. So I don't see fascist regimes returning to Europe. It's very unlikely. Populism doesn't really work. Popular voices are being suppressed, and yeah, I don't see a lot of hope for Europe the way things are going right now. Excuse me, I'll just